Winter Roses, Summer by FairyTalelovr, Chapter 22, The Strength of a Mother. John threw yet another pebble at the lake, watching as it skipped. As the weather cooled, the grass around him was beginning to frost. But the underground hot spring made the lake at the Godswood so warm the surface was actually fogging up. He looked back when he heard footsteps, and smiled when he saw who was coming.
"My wife sent you to drag me into the castle again?"
Isla chuckled. She wondered where you were. Again.
"I needed to get out for a while."
The woman took a deep breath, burrowing deeper into her cloak, as she leaned against a big rock and settled for a long conversation. Can I be nosy?
"Can I ask you why I'm not calling you aunt yet?"
John quipped back. That is not... She started blushing profusely.
"You heard that we approve, and according to Uncle Benjamin, you've been avoiding him since that day."
She sighed. I'm a commoner. I have no business meddling with lords.
"I'm a bastard. Some lords would say I'm worse than a commoner. And I married a princess."
That was different, Isla muttered.
"Uncle Benjamin is not set to be the heir to anything. After all these years, it's very unlikely any houses will even consider him for a marriage alliance. Which means he can marry whomever he chooses. He chose you. Don't deny yourself that."
That is not why I started this conversation, Isla said. You won't avoid me for long.
"I know."
John sighed, and throwing the last pebble he had in his hand. He knew he had been stalling, however truthful his words were. Lady Starling says you haven't been sleeping well. She is worried, and she is hurt because you won't talk to her. You can go up and speak to her. Find your uncle to vent, or I shall be pestering you until you tell me.
John smiled, knowing perfectly well that it was not an empty threat. I guess I was scared to tell her."
Why?
"My father, he told me about my mother."
Isla stiffened. What did he tell you?
"That John looked away, his heart breaking with sorrow. "I killed her."
It was a reflex. The slap snapped across the otherwise silent Godswood. Isla stood up straight, trembling with fury. John just stared at her, shocked, his cheek reddening. Don't you dare! Don't you ever fucking dare to say these words again! You spit on her memory for even thinking of it!
"Why would you... Wait, did you know her?" John asked, and Isla realised what she'd done, widening her eyes in panic, though she was still furious. Then she decided that the truth was half out anyway. You've always known you were born in the south, and that I am not a northerner. "So you knew her?"
I told you once my former lady was the kindest soul I have ever met, and I stand by that. She found out you were growing inside her. She smiled as bright as the sun. When she first felt you stirring, she cried with joy."
"You came north with... or did you come after?"
Once she realized, she held you against her chest with every ounce of strength she had left." She started, her eyes glazing over with tears and lost in the haze of memories. The winter roses scattered around the Godswood only strengthened the feeling, their smell almost transporting her to that faraway room where the tragedy had struck. John was fully focused on her, his heart beating painfully. All this time he had suffered unknowingly, and Isla held the truth that could soothe him. Someone other than his father that knew, not only knew her name, but her. A lady, a highborn, not some small-town whore or a fisherman's daughter like he had feared growing up. When her arms started to fail her, she called me closer and put you in my arms. Isla continued the tale.
My little girl had gone just 2 days before, so she begged me to feed you and care for you like she wouldn't be able to. She only rested when I agreed. A few minutes later, your father arrived, and she begged him to protect you, to keep you safe. I put you in his arms, and she named you, and when she went, she was smiling at you.
Tears were running down both of their faces.
She loved you so much.
Isla said in a whisper.
Don't poison that love.
John nodded, accepting her hug freely when his tears started to come down harder.
I'm terrified,
he confessed once he could talk through his sobs.
She died birthing me, and Queen Lyanna died birthing Dany. What if...
I know, Isla said, and I could say everything will be fine, but I can't. No one can promise that. Isla! You have to come quick! Dorea came running, out of breath with her cheeks red. It's time! Towels, the woman said. Many, many towels. As many as you can get. And hot water too. I am on my way. The maiden nodded and ran away again. John frowned, confused.
Time? Time for what?
Isla turned to him with a soft smile. Time for you to become a father. Dusk became evening, and then night, then dawn, then morning. Dorea had tried to keep John out of the room, but, terrified as he was, he refused to be away from Dany. When the handmaid insisted, he lost his patience.
And how do you propose to keep me out?
He asked. The young woman acquiesced, and he burst into the room, panicking when he found Daenerys pacing. He went cold with dread when Isla said it was time to push. And he was sure his hand would take some time to recover from the strength Dany was using to squeeze it. But he refused to complain. Not when she was in so much pain. Finally, the sun was at the highest point in the sky when Daenerys fell back against Jon's arms, and a loud cry rang over the room. Isla cradled the child, swaddling the baby in blankets. Jon carefully laid his exhausted wife on the bed, and stood up from Dany's side, walking over mesmerized. You have a daughter, my lord, Isla said with a huge smile. A little princess. Jon took her in his arms, like she was the most precious thing in the world. She had soft, wispy hair on the top of her little head, as dark as his own, and a few curls could be seen. Then she blinked, opening her little eyes, and Jon felt her stealing his heart away from his chest. She had bright lilac eyes. He smiled, tears rushing down his face like a river, and walked back to Daenerys' side. He sat by the bed and put their baby girl over her chest. Dany weakly raised a hand, but Jon helped her support the child.
We have a daughter, Dany.
She's a wonder, she croaked, her throat raw from all the screaming.
Jon smiled. She takes after her mother.
Isla cleaned herself up and went to get the family sitting room. Benjen, Sam and Bran were there, with varying degrees of worry and anxiety.
So?
Benjen demanded, the most worried and anxious. A little girl, Isla said, and they exhaled in relief. Can we see her? Bran asked, curious. Not right now, Isla said with a smile. They'll have a rest before they can have visitors. They nodded, and Sam started to push Bran out of the room, since the boy was asking to go outside. She went to where Benjen was standing. Yes, she said in a whisper, biting her lip nervously.
Are you saying?
Yes, I'll marry you. She squealed in joy as he lifted her off her feet, twirling her in the air before kissing her senseless when he put her back on her feet.
Who do I have to thank for this marvellous change of heart?
Your grandniece, Isla said, making him frown, holding her in my arms, bringing another child into this world. It just made me remember how life is so short, and I'm tired of living it alone. Benjamin smiled.
The miracle of life.
Her smile faltered. I can't. I might be too old already. I can't promise to give you children.
I will rejoice if you do, but that's not why I'm marrying you. You're the first woman in all these years I have wanted to marry. I have wanted to marry, to have a family. But before you, I didn't find anyone I wanted to spend the rest of my life with.
Isla laughed. I remember you said that when you crossed with me. Benjamin joined in her laughter. Though Isla stopped in to check on Daenerys a few times during the day, it wasn't until the next morning that she and Benjamin came in for a formal visit and to make the official announcement. The parents were thrilled with the news.
And what's her name?
Benjamin asked, holding his grandniece. Jon exchanged a look with Daenerys before turning to Isla. She stiffened when she understood his pleading look. That is a question for your father.
He wouldn't tell me,
Jon implored, though he felt guilty when he saw her anguished face.
Why? What is so dangerous about her name?
Isla closed her eyes, turning away from the conversation. Jon could sense her conflict. She wanted to tell him.
Did you swear to silence?
She nodded, and when she turned back her eyes were filled with tears. To Lord Stark, and to her, I vowed on my daughter's memory that I would never tell a soul. Don't ask me to tell you. Please, she beseeched, and Jon nodded.
I suppose you don't want to risk naming her for her other grandmother?
Benjamin asked, passing the child back to her mother. After the lengths Robert Baratheon went to eliminate the Targaryen name? No, it's safer if we don't, Daenerys said.
Well, if you do, and if you'd rather still honour a family member, I do have a sister,
Benjamin said, and Isla smiled at his ingenuity.
I'm sure no one will question the homage.
Dany smiled too. Lyanna Starling. I like it. Jon smiled too, feeling his heart warm.
Now she's a proper winter rose. My dear father, it is with the greatest delight that I announce the birth of your first grandchild and granddaughter, the Lady Lyanna of House Starling. I know your work keeps you in the capital, but we would be delighted to receive you, Arya, and Sansa to meet our daughter. It also pleases me to announce the betrothal between Uncle Benjen and Isla. The wedding is to take place in 3 moons' time, and the bride insists that any sooner would disrupt her soon-to-be niece needlessly. All our love. Sir John of House Starling, Lord of the Midnight Fortress and the Blessed Island.
Ella bit her lip for a moment, watching Ned go pale, then red, then finally purple. They were having luncheon in the Tower of the Hand when Sir Barristan brought a raven on the request of the Grand Maester. Finally, her curiosity got the best of her. What is it?
I am a grandfather,
he mumbled disbelievingly. Oh my! Ella gasped. How marvellous! Sansa exclaimed.
Lady Lyanna Starling.
Ned read, looking at Ella.
He named her Lyanna.
The woman smiled, but refrained from commenting, aware of the company. What else does it say? Arya demanded. When are we leaving?
Your uncle is getting married to Isla, so we'll go for the wedding. Well, you will certainly go. I hope the king will give me leave.
The girls soon left the small hall, excitedly talking about the gifts they would bring the baby, and the bride and groom, promising to meet Ella for their daily ride in 3 hours' time. Sir Barristan cleared his throat. He had a smile on his face.
Would you like me to inform his grace, Lord Stark? No! I'll do that myself. It's better that way. The Grand Maester will have read the letter, or at least he'll know that when you received it. The more you delay, the more Cersei will find suspicious. Is the king in his chambers? Yes, my lord. At least that was where I left him before I surrendered my post to Sir Meryn. Good, I'll be there presently.
Sir Barristan nodded and left the room. Ned stared at the letter for another moment, before looking up at Ella. She was clearly trying to contain a grin, but wasn't very successful as her lips curved upward.
Don't...
I'm not going to say anything, Ned exhaled, rolling his eyes at her antics.
This is dangerous.
You're giving it too much power, she said dismissively. Jon doesn't have a mother, and Daenerys wouldn't dare honour her own. So they chose to honour the closest female relative, Jon's aunt, who died oh so tragically.
How do you weave these tales so easily?
She smiled. A few years in King's Landing, and you might learn a little about the game as well.
Doubtful. I'm not made for these games of politics.
You shouldn't have become a player then.
Ned ignored her. Benjen should have...
You've said Benjen has advocated more than once for telling the truth. And I think it more likely Benjen and Isla helped it happen. And, on that note, will you allow the wedding? As your younger brother and in absence of your father, Benjen needs your permission.
Of course I'll allow it. Isla is trustworthy. Leah... He cleared her throat. I wouldn't have trusted her otherwise. And if this is what Benjen wants, he shall have it.
You still blame Brandon, don't you?
Ned sighed. I do. He was my brother, and I loved him, and I miss him terribly. But I will never quite forgive him for saying that he would talk to father, and never give me leave to marry you.
You know why Brandon did that. Because he was being forced into an arranged marriage, and he wanted to spread the misery.
Father was the one who was to set up everything to fail with his ambitions, and...
All right, I am stopping you now. It's in the past. We can't change it now. And it's useless to cry over the spilled wine.
Ella stated. I don't like this, he complained, standing up. I hate politics, and I hate lying.
You came to the wrong place, then.
Robert needs me here,
Ned said uneasily. Stop thinking about Robert for a minute, and...
He is my king.
Ella was growing frustrated. You sat him in the bloody chair, and you kept him there even when you knew there was a better contender.
And now we're plotting...
We're not plotting to overthrow him, and you know that. You fought a war to avenge your father and your brother, and to protect this realm from the madness of an unfit king. We're doing it again. It just so happens we don't have swords in our hands, and we're plotting to prevent an unfit ruler to even sit on the throne.
It's not honourable.
Isn't it? She asked, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Because, the way I see it, Joffrey has no right to the throne. Stannis might win a fight for the crown, but he'll be an unpopular, unloved and terrible king. Renly would keep a better grasp on his finances and governing than Robert, but he doesn't have the guts to keep the kingdoms in hand. And let's not delve into the very, very long line of Robert's bastards. He exhaled.
What if Jon doesn't want to be king?
He was born the king. He was born Aegon Targaryen, 6th of his name. He just doesn't know it.
This is moving in shadows. It's wrong, Ashara.
Ned, please, you're losing it. Regardless of having proof or not, if you go to Robert right now to tell him of the children's true paternity, he'll most likely believe you and call for their heads. He loves and trusts you, and he's got no love lost for Cersei. Plus, people have gossiped for years that the king's children don't have a single Baratheon trait. And Joffrey may be evil and cruel, but not even he deserves to be killed for this.
I could ask Cersei to.
Ella looked at him, unbelievingly. We already know of at least one time Cersei's tried to kill Robert, and we have more than enough reason to suspect they've plotted Jon Arryn's murder. You tell her you know of her infidelity, and that you're going to tell Robert, and she won't flee the capital for the safety of Casterly Rock. She'll kill Robert under our noses and manoeuvre herself as regent, most likely plotting your arrest for treason at the same time.
She wouldn't dare.
You severely underestimate the lengths a mother would go to protect her family, and the lengths a Lannister would go to protect their power. They've been plotting and plotting since Tywin was Hand to Aerys, and while he failed to marry Cersei to Rhaegar, he did end up managing to install her as queen. Do not, and please listen to me on this, do not go against the Lannisters expecting anyone in this city to side with you, because it is the right thing to do. You will only lose your head and endanger your daughters.
I'm tired. Tired of the backstabbing and the backroom deals.
That is what happens when a fool is sitting on the throne and the Lannisters have the run of the continent. Are you sure plotting against it wouldn't be the most honourable? Ned didn't have an answer to that. Ned waited with growing unease as the 5 women lounging about the king's bedchamber put their clothes to some semblance of propriety and left the room. Robert was in high spirits, laughing and completely unconcerned about the level of reproach his debauchery incited. "And what brings my best friend to this side of the castle?" "I wasn't aware you were otherwise occupied," Ned said, declining the offer of iced wine. "I just received a raven, and I thought to come and share my happiness." "I'm never too busy for you, Ned. You know that. I'd given your yellow smile. Or are you just frowning at my company?" The last woman left and the door was closed behind her. "Honestly, Robert, do you have to insult your wife so openly?" The king snorted. "Cersei is a frigid prude, Ned. We can't stand one another." Ned flinched at his nonchalance. "It would be different if I were married to someone who I loved, and who loved me back." "Oh, you poor deluded fool," Ned thought. "Robert isn't capable of keeping to one bed," he remembered Lyanna saying, on the very same night she yelled and screamed and cursed their father for accepting the betrothal. "As soon as the thrill fades, he will leave me to be the proper lady in the castle, and run to whichever whore opens her legs for him at a given night." "But tell me," the other man continued, clueless to his friend's reminiscence, "what are these news you want to share with me? A raven from Winterfell?" "The Midnight Fortress, actually. I am a grandfather." There was a flickering of warring emotions on Robert's face before he finally opened a genuine smile. "Congratulations, my friend! 7 hells, grandfather, you say? Jon is a fine young man, and he deserves it. So, has the Dragonspawn given him a son?" "Robert, please. I've raised the girl like a daughter. Calling her Dragonspawn only brings back sore feelings we would all be better off forgetting. She is a daughter of the North, and the Targaryen name is dead." Robert grimaced, but conceded the point. "Very well, I shall attempt to keep that in mind. But tell me, has Lady Starling given her husband a son?" "A daughter, actually," Ned said, bracing himself for the explosion. "Lady Lyanna Starling." Robert didn't disappoint, crushing his goblet in his fist and going as red as a tomato. "Why?" he said, and the anger was as palpable in his deep and grave voice. "My son doesn't have a mother, but he wanted to honour his aunt, because he knows how much I love her. My children know how beloved she was to Robert, and the tragedy surrounding her death." The king seethed for long moments before going slack in his chair. "A little winter rose. It is fitting, in the end. I guess I let that monster spoil the flower for me. But I should have remembered they were her favourite for a reason." Ned opted to stay quiet. "She was the most beautiful girl around, and she was to be mine. And oh, I would have given her the world. He had the throne. He even had a fucking wife already. And even he fell in love with her. The day the smiles died, a fool song in chord once. He never set foot in King's Landing again,
and I broke his fucking harp for good measure. How dare he to come here, to mock me, and playing a harp on top of it.
Robert sighed deeply.
All I got in the end was his throne. But what is the point if I couldn't save her? If I couldn't crown her my queen? A bloody chair that brings me a headache and no joy. I killed him, Ned. I killed him, and he still won.
Robert sighed deeply, his face betraying a sad, tired man who saw no future for himself. Ned remained silent.
You don't even imagine how he won, my friend, he thought. Even my son, Robert exclaimed, my firstborn, my heir. And he is a fucking monster as well.
I curse him. Ned remembered Lyanna had whispered with wavering strength, clutching Jon's little hand in hers. As he's taken my husband from me, as he's taken my son from me, as he is condemning my son to the life of an orphan, fearing for his safety. I curse him. Robert Baratheon will never see a son of his grow up. He will never live to be proud of a son of his blood. His life will be empty of joy and purpose, and he will come to despise the throne he stole in the height of his hubris. You underestimate the lengths a mother would go to protect her family, Ella had just said. Ned was unsure of what to say.
You said yourself, Robert, in Winterfell. The children are young. We can counsel Joffrey.
But the king only grimaced, his mood darkening.
No, that kind of rotten fruit can't be salvaged. Did you know that when he was a kid, he killed a cat? Some fool in the kitchens told him the cat was pregnant, probably thinking the prince might want to take a kitten for a pet. But Joffrey didn't have the patience to wait. He got a dagger and cut the poor animal open. To see what was inside, my royal father, the little shit said when he brought me the bloody dead kitten. I told him it was wrong, but the boy wouldn't see it. Said he was a prince, and I a king, and we might do as we please with dumb animals that only existed to live if we wanted them to. I beat him so hard I knocked 2 of his baby teeth out. Cersei wasn't pleased, and she even threatened me. I could barely look at the boy again. And then he did that atrocity in Winterfell. And again he can't see what is wrong, since Lady Starling is his subject, and his to do with as he pleases, he says. No, he can't be taught. He will not learn.
Ned felt a shiver go down his spine.
Robert, what are you saying? I don't know anymore, Robert said miserably. I don't know anything anymore.
End of chapter. Hi guys, hope you enjoyed that one. Oh boy, okay. A lot of mums in this. Danny, little Lyanna's here. I was looking forward to that. Mama Lyanna cursing Robert when she's dying. Jeez Louise. Cersei not being confronted, so that's why these things aren't happening. Ella counselling. She's obviously a mother to the girls now. Oh boy. And of course, Isla, queen in her own right. She and Benjen, I love that. And oh boy, this will be a funny. I've taken a peek at the next chapter. Ella busts out laughing. Anyway, you guys know the drill. Like, comment and subscribe, and hit that bell to be notified whenever I upload a new video. Have a good day, night, or whatever time zone you're in. Bye my guys, gals and non-binary pals. I'll see you in another video. Take care.